Hi and welcome to part 5 of the card game tutorial. In this part we are going to add a few new things. First we're going to add is so you can click and drag your cards about. You can also place them in certain card slots, and once you've done that you can then use that to attack enemies that are up in play just as a placeholder for the time being. So for this tutorial we're going to need a few extra things. I have copied the Godot tutorial for GUI that I'll link in the description. So I'm going to copy across those files into my GUI folder. And we've also got some enemies to add on, well, a enemy. So I'm just going to copy this folder in as well. And lastly, I also need the script from the Godot GUI tutorial, which is just a simple file that I'll copy across now. Okay, and with that we're ready to get started. So Godot will automatically re-import these for us, and I see we've got a few more things to use in our folders. First thing we're going to code is how to get it moving, so when we click on a card we can drag it and move it about the screen. So for that we need to get to our card based script. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is add some code here where it says in mouse. Okay, so we want it when we click and drag it, it's going to move about. There's going to be the same code is all over the place, so let's just copy some stuff from down here and copy it up for in mouse. Few differences because each one's their own little quirks. For here, our target position is just going to be the global mouse position, and also once we've finished we want to keep it in state in mouse, and we want to keep our position always wherever the mouse just is. Okay, if you do this, this won't quite work because that'll give you the top left corner of the mouse, won't give the exact center. So if you want the center of the mouse, we need to subtract for the card size. So we're going to go up 2 nodes and get the card node from there. And then again, we want that to be the permanent location. So now you can drag a card, you pick it up, and you can sort of move it about and play with it. Okay. We need to figure a way to also trigger this state. So we're going to add a new bit of code up here, and this is going to be my input code. So I'll basically say if the mouse is clicked on it, do some stuff. So let's create an input event. We need to match states as well, so we can only pick it up in certain cases. The states that should work out, if we've got it focused, that'll be the main one. I'll also add in mouse, just in case I need it. And also in play, when the card's in play, like on the board, we'll be able to pick it up as well. So we're going to add an event. We're going to say if I have just pressed the left mouse button. We then want to pick up our card. Okay, we're going to have a few variables to add in here quickly. We are going to have a card select variable. So this will say, have we just selected a card? There's basically like one of those switch variables, so basically it'll cause it to only trigger once. So what I mean is we're going to say, if card select is true, which starts off as true, we then want it to run the new state. We then want to say the state is going to be in mouse. And we've done a few more things. We need to say setup is going to be true, which we do for all our state changes. And we'll use it later on. I'm also going to keep a clock of what my last state was. The reason I'm doing this is that when I click it, I want to know has it just been clicked from my hand or just clicked from in play. So if my old state's focused on hand of in play, that's going to affect how we're going to treat it. Again, I only want this to trigger once. So I now say card select is false. We selected it, so we do not want to select it again. Let us quickly check that's working. Okay, we've got a few quirks there. Mainly I didn't quite sort out all these little bit of code here. I'm going to have a new var called in mouse time. And how this has been fairly short, because when I click the mouse, my mouse will always be close to the card anyway, so I don't want a long time, else then it'll appear to move really slowly. Okay, also don't forget to move the .x that was here. So running that is running fine now, so we can now pick up and drag and move a card about. So we're getting there. Also my target rotation should be 0. So just change that to there. And that's working fine. So that's the first step. We can now pick up and move cards fairly competently. What we're going to do now is we're going to create a few more things that we're going to use up here. I'm going to add a couple of nodes I'm going to have one node for my card slots. Not slots. And I want to make sure this is above cards. So again, remember, anything towards the bottom is drawn on top. So I want my cards drawn on top of the card slots, not the other way around. And I've got another node, which is going to be for my enemies. Okay, let's first of all start by creating enemies, because that's a fairly straightforward one. For this, we have standard format. We'll start with a margin container, and then we'll stick everything in there. Okay, so in my margin container, I'll call this enemy. I want a few boxes, so I want a vertical box container, so it's going to be the picture of the enemy, and then the health bar underneath it. In here I want a margin container, that's going to keep the image, so just call it image container quickly. And attached to that I'm going to add a sprite. This will be my image or my enemy, and then I'm just going to drag in from assets enemies the lovely open source picture I found. Okay, also we don't want to offset it, and I'll do all the resizing stuff in code rather than here. Also in my boxes, I'm going to add another child node. I'm going to insert a child scene. I'm going to add this bar scene down here. Okay. Okay, that's not filling up properly. That's because in an image container, we want to have a minimum size. So I want to say the size of this image, at least in here, is going to be 500 by 500. And now we're going to shrink it so that my image will fit perfectly into this box. Okay, we can do that straight away. Let's just add a bit of code, and we'll have it working in script. So ready function, image container image, and we're going to change its scale. Again, same code as always. We want it to look like the image container's rectangle size. I think it's best if we use rect min size, if that's fixed. And we then want to divide it by the size it is. Yes. Dot texture dot get size. Okay, and that will straight away resize it to the perfect size you want it to be. Also, while I'm here, I'll set up some variables as well that we're just going to use briefly. So I'll say current health is 10, and I'll say max health is 10. Again, these are purely placeholders, just to make sure our code can work and interact with these okay. And also when we put this into play, we want to make sure in our barcode that we want this bar to start as full. And when we do that, that's going to be texture progress, and that is the value here. So if we go back to where it was, back to my piece of code, we want to find the texture progress, which is there. And we'll say value is always 100, because typically enemies always start at full health. I'm also going to change it so that the text, which is here, will read this current health. Keep in mind if you type this in that this will crash, because text needs to be a string and this is a number. You need to put a string around here. Okay, that'll give us our bar ready. Okay, we can save this now. We'll save as enemy, and then back in our main place-based scene, we are going to instance that as a child scene under the enemies tab. Okay, and I'll also sort out movements for that now. So there's a wee bit glaring right now. We can start off as invisible, and we can sort that stuff out in code. And we'll deal with this in the ready function. So as soon as it starts, we want to get the enemy node. And we're going to say it's visible. So visible is true. Also, ages ago, I should have called randomize right at the start. This basically means that each time you start the game, it'll re-randomize the numbers. Otherwise, you'll get the same patterns turning up. So the enemies are visible. We can just throw in a random position for it to start off with. Again, typically you have slightly more logic to where I'm going to position them. But right now, I'm going to chuck them as a pure placeholder. And lastly, I want to shrink it down a bit because that's fairly massive. So copy this down. And let's just say it's going to be 30% of the size it was. So now if we run that code, it should look in a slightly better position at a slightly better size. Okay, and we'll stick with that for now. Again, later in like parts 6, 7, whatever, we'll have it so this is like a much more logical position. Okay, next we can add a basic card slot. So again, let's start the margin container. We can just call this card slot. And as a child to this, we want a sprite. And I'm just going to chuck in from GUI card base 1. We'll just leave it there. Again, we do not want to offset. And as we always do, just resize that in code. So attach script, chuck in the ready function, and we're just going to rescale that sprite. Okay, so now we're going to have a basic card slot. Typically, when we get our full code up and running, we'll have for like 10, 20 of these, or however many you actually need. Time being, I'm just going to stick with one, just to make things a bit easier for getting basic proof of concept of how all these things are going to work and fit together. In PlaySpace, we're going to create one of those card slots. So I'm going to say I want a new slot. That is going to be card slot.instance. It's going to instantly create one. And as we've done over here, I need to preload that into my memory. Okay, and make sure this card slot is actually where it is. I think I saved it and I just chucked it in the default directory as well. Okay, and down here we're just going to create our first card slot. So we can say that we can say that's position. It's going to be, like I said, we'll just have 40% of the viewport. And we also want to give it a size. And we want that to be our card size. Okay, we then want to add it so that's child of the card slots node, so we can always find it easily if we need to. So getting those card slots, and let's add it as a child. And I said one more thing now, we'll use it for another part though mainly. I'm going to create a variable and I'll call that card slot empty. So basically this will basically keep track of if anything's in any of the card slots. So we're going to add a new entry to it. I'm going to say the new entry is true. And I'm going to say this card slot is empty, so therefore chuck a card in it, chuck whatever into it, and we can do that. Let's check that's running okay for us. Yep, there's our card slot, the cards are placed there, and then we can attack our little fella there. Okay, now we can add the code in our card base that says if we let go of the card, we can then put it in the card slot as long as our mouse or the card itself is in the right position. So we want another event, this time rather than is action pressed, we want to know when we release the left mouse button. First things first, I've got to make sure card select is false. And we have two cases. One, if we have just picked up the card from my hand, and one if the card is already in play. So first, we're going to say if my old state, so if it used to be focused in my hand, this is going to handle all the stuff for putting a card into a card slot. Okay, let's create some variables. So I want to call card slots occasionally. That is just going to be the node up here where card slots are. So we need to go up 2 nodes to get to play space. And then I just want to call card slots. And next, I created a variable. We just saw it in play space. That was called card slot empty. And I want to call that down here as well. Okay, so now we have the variable that basically tells us where these card slots will live, and also how many there are, and whether or not they are empty or full. We now want to cycle through each of the card slots. So for I in the range of my card slots, I think I want to get child count. That will say how many children we have. So for each of the children we want to cycle through. I want to do various things for them. First, we need to check if that child, or if that card slot itself is empty. So if the ith entry of card slot is true, we can then put a new card into it. So let's call some more variables. We're going to have its position, and that is going to be the position of that card slot. So get the ith child, and we then want its rect position. And we do the exact same thing again for that card slot size. So right now, the size of these card slots is the same as a regular card size, but that won't necessarily always be true. And I also want to keep track of the current mouse position. So let's just call this a new variable. It will literally just be the current mouse position. Again, we don't need to do this, it just makes my code look a bit less messy. Now, we're going to have a big if loop. We're going to basically say if the mouse is somewhere in that card slot that we're going to define using these three variables. You could use a sort of on entry or exit things using the signals, but that gets a bit messy in here, and actually it's a bit of a more clean solution if we just define it all. I want to check if the mouse position is somewhere between the top left corner and the bottom right corner. The way we code this is I've got to make sure the x coordinate is going to be less than this x coordinate plus my size's x coordinate. Also, we need to make sure that the x coordinate is at least at the x coordinate of the position. Okay, so now I've got a bit of code that will tell us whether or not my mouse is in that card slot position and anywhere within its borders. So now we want to move it to that position. So as always, we need to set setup to be true, which says basically ready to move. And we then want a target position, target scale, and all that kind of stuff. I'm then going to have a variable that says movement into play is true. So basically I only want to trigger this movement to occur once rather than repeatedly. So for that I need this variable here. I also need to define that variable up here. We can have that starting off as false, so set it to be true here. We then need a target position. And that is just going to be the card slot's position. And I need to take away the size of the card so that it aligns nicely in the center. And again, card size in my play space gives me like my current default card size. And we have to divide that by 2, so it appears in the center, not at the top left or bottom right. Lastly, we can change our state. This card is now in play. And also, I said right at the start, card select was false. We can now reselect that so card select can be true again, which means basically I can move it again if I wish to. Also, since it's a for loop, we may as well break. So if you're not sure, break will basically just find whatever for loop is in, no matter how many if loops you're down the path, and break out of it. So the point of this is once we've found our card slot, we don't want to search for the other X number of card slots when we know we're not going to find anything there. Okay, we can also say that if I don't pick a card, if I don't find a card at all, we then want to say if the state is not in place, or the card's not already in play, all I want to do is make it go back from whence it came. So again, for this, we would recall setup being true, and we would just tell it to go back where it came from. So target position is the card's default position, sorry, lowercase, and tell it to reorganize my hand again. And also, we need to say card select is true again, so we can pick up any new cards if we need. So that's going to handle us dropping the card into a card slot. I am also going to want an else loop here, because this bit of code only worked if we're looking to put a card into a card slot. We then want to say else, so the only option for old state is if it's in play pretty much. I think in mouse can't really happen. And this will handle everything once the card is in play. So in other words, attacking and that kind of stuff. Okay, in fact we can handle this now. We can basically copy a lot of the stuff from up here. So here we had a var card slots. We now want a new var, and that's going to be enemies. The more stuff we do. Okay, here we've got two options right now. So we've basically done the test. If we stack an enemy, we'll add some code here that will deal with actually damage in a second. But the question is what we do with a card. We've got two options. I'm going to go through them both. One of them go through really quickly right now. I'll say one option is the card just moves back to where it came from. Okay, so back in the in-play card slot. The other option I'll do later is that we can then discard the card and have it basically vanishing from the game. So first things first for this, all we need to say is setup is true, moving into play is true, and state is in play. And also card select is true. We don't need this target position because the target position will be the exact same one that we called here. So it'll automatically know where its last target position was, and it'll head back there. Okay, a couple of things to sort out. Over here, I probably should have been more proper and defined a target scale, so basically how big you want this card to be. And I just want that to match the size of my card slot. Okay, we haven't called target scale before. Let's add that as a there. And we also need to add some actual code, and we call state in play. So we copy this, and again we had a special loop that said if moving into play. Again, the reason we have to call this is we only want this command to run once. If I don't have if move into play, it will then basically get stuck at the end of the else loop, which might mean it might constantly try and assign its position to its current position, which A, can waste a bit of memory, and B, it can sort of get the card stuck there so you can't move it again if you want to. So it's always good to make sure that once you finish this loop, we've got to the end of it, we then stop running it anymore. We change these things. We want this to look like this. We've had it before where it just goes towards a target position. We also have a target scale now. And then again, I'll do my little bit of code here just in case we slightly misalign the scale. Rotation we probably don't care about, but I'll leave in just in case. Okay, I'm fairly sure for this entire section, rotation should be locked at 0 anyway, but it never hurts to sort of keep a bit of fallback code in there just in case. So now it should be working fine. Did not expect that. Did not expect that at all. And again, I misset my target scale, so it should be card slot side divided by rect size. Otherwise, your target scale is massive. Last thing to change, if we don't find an enemy, we of course want to set it back to where it came from. So we know if card select is false, that means it hasn't found a new home, and I'm told just to go back to where it came from. Okay, so now that's got the next phase working. We can pick up a card, we can drop it in there, we can move it anywhere, it snaps back, and we can also move it to an enemy, and it'll snap back again. Often it's worth checking if these bits of code are working. So often I throw in little print commands as like debugs, so we can check if we actually the difference between landing on an enemy and just landing on random space because the code is actually identical there. So let's quickly check that. Throw a card in, nothing happens there, and yeah, we are getting our little debug command there to say that it actually hits an enemy. Now we can add some ways to affect damage to the enemy. It's starting to vaguely resemble a game right now, which is quite nice. So I want to call the attack number. So what I'm going to say, I'm going to damage it by the attack number in our card. And if you remember from our cards, they all have an attack number. If I have my card base node, we stored the attack down here, whereas A and R was attack and retaliation. So let's call that. Let's say get the node. And it is there. We want to get its text. For this, we have attack and retaliation bundled together. All I want to pick up right now is the first character. Okay, the first part of that string, which will be the first number of the attack. I might need to change this code if we have attack values over 10, or that go into 2 or 3 digits. Because then, of course, I want the first 2 digits, but right now this will work. If I call it that, that will work because this is a string. I'm going to treat it as a number. So we're going to say I want it to call the integer, where it's whatever you get from reading this. So in this case, I'll now call the attack number, and then we want to say to the enemy, change your health. And I think the best way to do this is to call that as a function. So we're going to say, let's get our current enemy. So enemies get child I. So that's the enemy we found we clicked on. And we're going to call a function. We're going to call that function change health. And we're going to change it by whatever the attack number is. So we now need to go to my enemies, and we're going to add a function. And this function we said was called change health. And we need to pass it a number here. Okay, so for this we're basically going to say whatever the health is, knock it down by the number. So current health, we're going to subtract from it whatever number I pass into my function. We also want to do two more things. We want to change the texture progress. We had a bar for its health. We're going to call that and we're going to change that. So get the node, just this one here. And we're going to set it to, again for this, it goes from 0 to 100, at least it does in my current iteration. So I want to do 100 times the current health divided by the max health. So I'll basically convert the health into percentage, which it can then display. And also I want to change the text. So here I said this little line here, which actually just copies straight through. So that should be the next scene. We can now deal damage to enemies. It goes in place there. And if I drag onto it, we're knocking off the health. And you can kind of see the HPs changing there as well. So far some slight errors. We have no anything for actual defeat and death, but that'll wait to another part, I'm afraid. Okay, we've got a couple things left to do. We're going to first of all sort it out so that this card here no longer takes part in my hand. So example, all these cards are still moved to size, and if I focus on one, sometimes it calls that card back. There we go. So we're going to change that, and we're just going to add it in so the cards can discard. So first things first, let's quickly actually add a discard pile. Okay, I want to move it, so just push it down a bit in the transform. First things first, I don't want my discard to have a card back. So we look on discard pile and textures, we have the disabled one for when things are blank. So let's just say in ready that this card is always disabled. We need to rescale it as well, so that is the same line as here. And that's it. That's all the code we're going to need in discard pile. It'll make sense at some point in our play space to call this as its own location. So the other cards will need to know where that discard pile lives. So let's look at our play space code. Right when I created this code, I had this for loop, which basically organized every other card except the card that I'd just drawn. That was organized up here. That's probably a very bad way of doing it. Basically, anyway, you've got in essence the same card running twice. It's pointed to have it running in two different locations. So we're going to grab this, we're going to take it away, and we're going to assemble that as its own function. We can call this function organize hand. Okay, and just copy that all in there, and that should be fine. And then right where I deleted it, paste this back in. And before, I had it so that it didn't run for the card we'd just drawn. So we're going to change that now as well. The reason I got around that was that I told it to add it as a child after we ran this code. So now basically I want organize hand to be the last thing I'm going to run. So it's going to run right here. That does mean we've got a slight issue that my number of cards in hand is going to get slightly messed up because we've adjusted it so it's always one less than the actual number to deal with like Godot's number system. So it says numbers card in hand is 2. That means there are 3 cards in hand. Again, it's a mess, but it's because we always start counting from 0. To solve this, we're going to now say in the most confusing fashion, we actually start with -1 cards, which again means 0 cards. So now this organized card is going to work for everything, including the card we have just selected. So we need to find out basically what bits of code are completely redundant or basically been called before. So we define a card number, so we don't need to define it here. I'm basically going to go through and anything that's defined here, I'm going to comment away here. Okay, so all this code is commented, we no longer need. So it's basically just copied down in organized hand. I'm going to add one new thing, I think I mentioned a second ago, which was the location of the discard pile. So we've got deck position, we also want discard position. And we want to get the node discard. Okay, and we need to call that here. So we have new card discard pile. And that's just going to be this little fella here. And as always, we're going to subtract card size over 2. Okay, let's clean this up. And I've got a bit more robust coding over here. And the reason I'm going to do this was so that we can basically delete a card or delete at least a card from being in cards. To do this, let us add a new node. And I'm going to call this one cards in play. So anytime a card goes into play, we're going to have to basically give it a new parent. Just chuck that there. Lastly, I had enemies was a bit too low down, which meant it was appearing over my cards. So let's drag that up as well. No, okay, last thing I said I'd change today is going to be that we can also have it so we discard a card here. So here, when we land an enemy, I told it to go back from where it came from. I'm going to change that. I'm just going to end up creating a new state here. I'm going to call that state move drawn card to discard pile. And again, let's update that in my enum. I'll check it right at the end. I suppose I'll be sensible and change it in this enum as well. Okay, so we need a new state. And that was move drawn card to discard. And this is going to be a fairly simple one. We move drawn card to hand as like a template. This will be unique because I'm going to set its target position in the setup command. I'm going to say I want you to go to where the discard pile is. Rotation has been fixed with 0 for a long time, so I don't need this line here. I don't need any of these lines here. I'll stay with draw time, so that's not a bad time to use for that. And my scale I'm going to change. I'm going to use the scale line that I've used here in reorganize hand. And then let's just fix both of those. Make sure that rect scale is finished at original scale. We don't want to change the state. We definitely want to do that. That shouldn't even be there, to be honest. And I'm going to do the same thing I always do. I'm going to have a if loop that will only trigger once. So if move into discard, and then right at the end, I'm going to say that is false. Again, 2 reasons for this. It removes how much processor power it needs, not permanently moving the card to its current position, and also occasionally that results in a card getting stuck, as in we can't move it again because it's permanently being reset by this code here. So if moving to discard, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to say that is true as well. And I'm going to create that as a var. And lastly, we have the problem that we are basically triggering this move drawn card to discard pile, but card select is false. So it should change card select to be true here. So we drag it in, it should do 2 damage, which it does, goes to discard. We then select a new card, this should do 1 damage. Yeah. The rest of resizing nice. We have a slight issue where this squad leader is not moving for some reason when I zoom in other cards. But I'll deal with that in part B, like I said. We've got a few bug fixes I want to do. Most are related to the fact that most of this code only works if my game window is a specific size. What I'm going to do in part B, part B for this, I'm going to be trying to generalize the entire code so that basically everything in here, everything you see, will be a function of the viewport size, which basically means if you double the resolution, the game shouldn't look visibly different. Everything will stay the same apparent size, you just have better resolution. Okay? And then from there we can have a bit more freedom to basically add more card slots, which is what can be the main plan probably in part 6. Okay, thanks for listening, and I hope that was useful.